Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney is committing to spending billions more on defense in the coming years. CP24's Andrew Brennan is live with the latest on the NATO meeting in Brussels.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the conclusion of negotiations for Canada's participation in the European Union's Security Action for Europe, also known as SAFE.
As the Prime Minister warned of a new imperialism threatening the world, Mark Carney says more military spending is needed to help protect Canada from multiplying threats.
For much of its modern history, Canada has lived with a quiet assumption about security and power. The country would remain close to larger allies, align its defense choices with established partners, and avoid drawing too much attention to itself on the global stage. That approach felt sensible for decades. It kept costs predictable, reduced political risk, and allowed Canada to focus on trade diplomacy and domestic stability, while others carried the heavier military burden. Over time, that way of thinking became normal, almost invisible, woven into how decisions were made and explained to the public. But the world that made that arrangement comfortable has been steadily disappearing. Global power is no longer as stable as it once seemed. Long-standing alliances are being tested. Supply chains that were assumed to be permanent have proven fragile. Technology has become as important as territory, and control over data software and industrial capacity now matters as much as troop numbers or hardware counts. In that environment, Canada has been forced to confront a difficult question that it postponed for years. Is it enough to remain a reliable follower, or does long-term security now require something more deliberate and more independent? That question has been moving quietly through government circles, industry boardrooms, and military planning offices. It has not been framed as a dramatic break or a rejection of allies. Instead, it has taken the form of careful reviews, strategic reassessments, and conversations that rarely make headlines. Yet, taken together, those conversations point to a deeper shift in how Canada sees itself and how others are beginning to see Canada as well. This is the context in which a significant development took shape largely out of public view. While attention remained fixed on familiar debates over fighter jets, defense budgets, and NATO commitments, Canadian officials were engaged in discussions that would place the country somewhere it had never been before. Not at the edge of a security arrangement, not as a junior partner, not as a customer, but as a direct participant in shaping how another major region of the world prepares for the future. Behind closed doors in Brussels and Ottawa, Canada was invited into SAFE, the Security and Defense Action Framework that now sits at the center of Europe's long-term defense strategy. SAFE is not a single program or a symbolic pact. It is the mechanism through which Europe plans procurement, coordinates industrial production, secures supply chains, and aligns military capability across borders. It is designed to reduce dependence on unpredictable external actors and to ensure that Europe can sustain itself through decades of instability, conflict, and technological competition. What makes this moment extraordinary is not simply that Canada was invited. It is that Canada was the only non-European country to receive that invitation. Other close partners were not included. Long-standing allies with deep historical ties and extensive military cooperation were left outside. Canada alone was brought inside the framework itself, not as an observer, but as a participant. This was not a gesture of courtesy. It was a decision rooted in calculation. Europe is facing a future that demands reliable partners who can deliver over long time horizons. Elections will come and go, governments will change, but weapons factories, supply chains, and research centers must keep running regardless of politics. Europe needed partners it could trust to remain steady, predictable, and committed to shared rules. In that evaluation, Canada stood out. Canadian defense industry has often been underestimated because it does not dominate headlines the way larger players do. Yet over time, it has built a reputation for precision, reliability, and specialization. Canadian firms produce advanced sensors, communication systems, robotics, aerospace components, armored vehicles, and high-quality steel products that already form part of global defense supply chains. What SAFE does is pull those contributions into the center rather than leaving them at the margins. For Canadian companies, the implications are profound. Access to SAFE means access to one of the largest defense procurement markets in the world at a moment when spending is accelerating rapidly. European governments are rearming, modernizing, and replacing decades-old systems. The scale of that investment runs into the hundreds of billions, and over the next decade into the trillions. Being inside SAFE allows Canadian firms to compete for those contracts on equal footing rather than navigating barriers and exclusions from the outside. This is not just about exports, it is about integration. SAFE aligns standard specifications and long-term planning across borders. Companies that are part of that system can invest with confidence, knowing that demand will exist not for a single contract cycle but for decades. That kind of certainty attracts capital, encourages research and development, and supports the growth of skilled workforces across multiple regions of Canada. The geopolitical consequences are equally significant. For decades, Canada's security posture has been overwhelmingly oriented southward. The United States has been the primary defense partner, the dominant market, and the central reference point for military planning. That relationship remains vital, and SAFE does not replace it, but it does rebalance it. By embedding itself in Europe's defense architecture, Canada gains leverage and options. It is no longer dependent on a single channel for cooperation or influence. From Europe's perspective, Canada offers something unique. It is a democratic, stable, geographically distant partner whose production cannot be easily disrupted by regional conflicts or internal European politics. That distance becomes an asset in a world where resilience matters. It diversifies risk and strengthens Europe's ability to sustain itself under pressure. This invitation also reflects a broader reassessment of Canada's role. For years, the country has been seen as dependable, but passive, engaged, but cautious. SAFE suggests a different image. One of a country capable of contributing not just resources, but stability, judgment, and continuity. That reputation has been earned quietly through decades of predictable policy and measured diplomacy. In an era of sudden reversals, that predictability carries real value. This moment is not about militarization for its own sake. It is about recognizing that security in the modern world is inseparable from industrial capacity, technological control, and strategic partnerships. Countries that cannot produce, maintain, and adapt critical systems become dependent on others' choices. SAFE offers Canada a way to avoid that vulnerability while contributing to a collective effort that aligns with its values. Canada now stands at a crossroads. It can treat this as a technical arrangement and allow it to proceed without much public engagement. Or it can recognize it as a signal that its role is evolving and begin a broader conversation about what kind of contributor it wants to be in an increasingly unstable world. What is clear is that the assumption that Canada can remain on the sidelines while others shape the future no longer holds. The invitation to SAFE marks a turning point. It reflects trust earned, influence gained, and responsibility accepted. Whether Canadians fully embrace that responsibility will determine how this chapter is written. The world is changing quickly and often unpredictably. In that environment, countries that are steady, adaptable, and willing to invest in long-term partnerships gain influence not through force, but through reliability. Canada has been recognized for those qualities. The question now is how it chooses to use them. This shift did not arrive with alarms or urgency, and that is precisely why it matters. It signals a deeper change beneath the surface, one that will shape industry's alliances and security choices long after the headlines move on. Canada has quietly stepped into a larger role. The consequences of that step are only beginning to unfold.